At PayU, we've decided to go on a journey to redefine the fintech space. This is why we're traveling around the world, crossing borders to meet experts, leaders, and innovators. People who we admire, people who are writing our alphabet. And by that, I mean the Fintech Alphabet.
All right, guys. So we'll just start with a quick introduction of yourself. So we'll start with Claire.
So I spent most of my career at PayPal, and there I did many different roles in product management, in business development. I ended up by leading the P2P business line for PayPal. And throughout my whole time there, I was intensely working with analytics and data, and not always very happy with the way I was working with data analytics. And I think at the end of the day, that's what brought me to data science and to Dataiku that I joined earlier this year. I help our customers maximize the business value that they get from data and data science. So I help companies maximize their impact with data.
I started my AI journey somewhere in 96. And I started working in speech technology for my master's, and then after that PhD. And at that time when I was working to that extent, AI as a term was people were hating it because the previous version of AI had failed miserably. So I lived through that phase, and it was mostly because of the passion towards the research which I was doing. And earlier I was with Philips for 5 years working in the healthcare systems. And then I realized that the data will never reach because, healthcare systems are the most protected systems as such, if you can see. And then I went to IBM Research, where I was working in the education department. Then I went to Citibank, where I was looking at the financial data to make sense out of it and developing speech recognition system, OCR systems. And right now I am with Swiggy, where I'm heading the applied research team, which is working on computer vision problem statements, NLP problem statements, and speech problem statements.
So right. we went from New York to Bengaluru. Now let's go back, to the European time zone with Jane, who is with us from Amsterdam.
I started my first business when I was 18, and then I never stopped. But, after I finished my tenure as a CEO of Yandex Money, which was a fintech, it was in 2013, I realized that I'm a bit tired of fintech, to be honest, if not to say bored. And then I started looking around, and that was big data and AI, which was very quickly. Oh, but then it wasn't AI, right? It was machine learning. But yeah, that was my new business I became a director of, Yandex Data Factory. And then in a few years after that, when I left Yandex Data Factory, I just decided to have some time not being a director of anything. And that's so much fun. So I'm a co-founder. So currently I'm a co-founder of one of industrial AI startup called Mechanica AI, basically doing AI-based solutions for process industries like, metallurgy, mining, cement, chemicals, this kind of like real things. But I only spend part of my time for this startup, and the rest of the time, all kinds of things around data. I participate in a bunch of advisory boards, including, Fintech advisory boards for PayU, and including Global Future Councils for World Economic Forum. I teach AI and data-driven companies and data strategy for Singularity University Benelux to organizations on how to deal with these technologies. And yeah, all kinds of things around data and digital transformation and AI.
For you, in your experience, Jane, really, what is it you're looking for in those startups to actually say, yes, there is a true differentiated and true substance to their claims of using AI or machine learning in their business? What is it you're looking for?
everything outside of the technology itself. The majority of AI startups, it's all about application. It's all about how do you really understand how to introduce your technology and your product into existing ecosystems, existing processes, existing companies, because that's the most difficult thing. The technology is easy. Changing people's behavior, that's what's hard. And usually, the guys in tech startups, they way underestimate it. They usually think like, we have this new shiny tech and we can change the world. Well, yes, but that's not the tech per se you need to start with.
That's interesting, this one. And Claire, if I think of you, you're the value maximizer, right? And you work with a lot of very big established companies. What do you think when you hear Jane about it's not so much about the technology itself, right? This new shiny object, whatever is your model, etc. It's actually about the culture and the behaviors. Is that something really that you find yourself in your job? Is that really, what is defining maybe the value of AI in this globalization?
Yes. I mean, totally. I couldn't agree more with Jane. We are a tech company at Dataiku, right? We provide a platform that helps companies scale their data effort. And you could think, well, that's it, right? You give the tech and everyone knows how to use it. Everyone knows how to get value out of it. Boom, right? Well, no, that's not how it works. And it's great because it gave me a job, so in an interesting one, right? But basically, and I think Jane touched upon a few of them. First of all, is what do you apply it to, right? I mean, it's great to have a tool. It's great to empower people, to train people on a tool, but they need to know how to use it, on what to apply it, and what's going to drive value, right? Not every model is good. Not every data project is good, right? So being able to prioritize the right projects, and ironically, what I've seen is that the people who actually conduct data science are not the people who are closest to the business. They're not necessarily business people themselves, right? So they don't necessarily know what are the best business application. And so one thing we say is a great partnership between the business functions and the data science team and data analyst team is extremely important to deliver value, right? So changing the way people make decisions and actually trusting the model, having faith in the model because you understand how it has been built, where the data comes from, what are the parameters that have been put in the model is very key to adoption of AI and successful adoption to AI. And it's not easy. Yeah.
Are you taking out control out of these guys, actually? It's not just the understanding and the benefits of AI, but could it be a simple question of having to relinquish control to this black boxy model also?
I don't think that's the idea, to relinquish control. What we believe in at Dataiku is that data science is a collaborative effort, meaning that it's not just data science building a model in a black box environment. It's about bringing the different stakeholders around the table to build the best model ever, to build a model that will work, deliver value, and in which you can build faith. The great thing is that now tools are less and less techy, if I may say. You don't need to be a coder and to understand Python and R to be able to do data science, right? So with those tools that have made it very accessible to anyone, even business people, it's a great way to make that shift towards democratized data.
Hemant, when you hear that, how does it relate to your experience? And you working in a company like Swiggy. And in fact, my question is I remember Swiggy at the very beginning. When you guys started the operations, in India, starting the conversation at the beginning was really about building the network of restaurants, building the network for delivery. But what I've seen myself from the outside, over the last couple of years, and I've seen the same in China with Meituan, is now when you talk, about these businesses that have reached scale, the first thing they bring is we have a lot of data. That's truly what we need to harness to better serve our customers. It's not so much about building the delivery networks, not so much about building the delivery of restaurants. The business model has been validated in a way. Now it's all about the importance, of machine learning, in actually managing the demand and so on and so on. So I wanted to understand, is Swiggy an AI company that happens to do food delivery and you could do other stuff? Or is it still, the food delivery trying to optimize with some models? How do you see that? And what's the impact you've seen?
Very interesting question, actually, Lauren, first. Because, yes, we started with full delivery and now we are operating at a scale where unless and until we are an AI company, we cannot do what we are doing. So for us, it is not even an option not to be an AI company because the scale which we are operating. So just, let's say I cannot reveal the numbers which are there, but let's say 1 million orders to be delivered in a day. All across India, 200,000 delivery partners who are there on the road, and 100,000 restaurants from which the people can order. And think of it that this whole, big system, it is existing every minute, and this system has to scale 10 times of its normal value during the peak hours. So let's say during the breakfast time, 1 order is coming and 10 orders will be there at the lunchtime. This is approximately the scale. And all of us has to work in a seamless fashion across. So now you look at it that without AI in the place where all of this is automated, none of the things which we are doing can be done. So we have to move towards AI and we have to put all these systems in place. But now what is happening is we know that this AI in place, we can really deliver anything and everything across India. Think of it that how much can be achieved by the same system which started for food, but now it is penetrating everywhere. So now when we look at Swiggy in the current context, it is an AI company. And it is using that capability to move into any other place where hyperlocal convenience could be good for our consumer. And that's approximately where we operate as of now.
That's interesting what you say. Defining yourself, your business is, we are an AI company first, right? Is before Swiggy, if I remember, you were at Citi, right?
Exactly.
Is Citi an AI company?
Good question. It depends on from what perspective, Lauren, you want to look at, because many of the financial systems, they want to be in the bandwagon of, let's say, AI. But there are so many regulations which are there in place that they cannot onboard themselves into that bandwagon. But then there are companies like PayU or somebody, who are having a fresh start. They can be, AI first company, and then they are using AI to go into the finance. Whereas when you look at Citi is basically a financial organization which is trying to use AI, but there is already so many processes which are in place. There are so many people who are having a certain mindset. Can they be changed? Because I can get the tools, but are people willing to, and that power of AI to unleash it, people have to first, believe in some part of it. And that becomes a slight of a resistance if I look at it. And it's not about only Citi. This is about many organizations who want to be, but at the same time, they are not able to leave the place where they are because it's a major disruption overall. And many people are not ready for the disruption as of now.
Looks like we go back again to the behaviors and culture, right?
In similar fashion, you are right.
right?
So there are young folks who are really looking at changing the world.
Right.
But then there is a system which is there, and more hierarchical the system is, less are the chances that disruption can be brought very naturally. Disruption will be top down or something, and heads will roll and those kind of things. Whereas in a startup, which is more of, I want to prove myself, I need to survive. I do not have a choice but to take the more riskier options, because the world is very difficult otherwise.
Keep this one. We'll come back to that, because the beautiful world of startup where we can disrupt everything because we haven't built anything, we want to build it.
Exactly.
Keep this one, because I want to come back on this, because at the same time, and you mentioned that a few minutes ago, the importance of having access to data, a huge amount of data, is paramount. And at the end of the day, I start seeing this data being harnessed by fewer and fewer very large companies. So how will build the data? But before that is I wanted to have your views, Jen, because I saw you nodding, when you heard Emmett and also Claire, and I love mechanical AI, right? But when I hear mechanical AI, I mean, like, is that an oxymoron as well, right? So you have, these large, very traditional industries with a lot, I guess, of tangible assets, and you're bringing, an AI element to their business. So how do you do that? And why do you do that? Right? How difficult is it?
Well, let's start with why. Actually, yeah, I honestly think first it happened accidentally, as well, many good things happened, because in my previous business in Yandex Data Factory, we were trying to apply our machine learning technologies to like wherever. We had no idea, right? We were looking for it. And that's how we bumped into the industrial sector and especially process industries. And then very quickly I realized that, to be honest, I believe that is the biggest thing that AI can do in our world in the next decade. Because these industries, they are, like 1/4, maybe a bit less, 1/4 of world GDP. Like oil and gas, metals, mining, cement, all these things. No one really knows much about what happens there with all these innovations. Well, it's such a huge thing. I mean, banking is minuscule comparative to those industries. No offense here, right? But everyone talks about AI and data and banking, and no one talks about AI and data and metallurgy except for some metallurgists. So yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity, and that's why. And it is quite exciting. It's quite interesting. In a way, sometimes it's even easier than dealing with bankers. What Hemant just described, of course, it's the problem everywhere in any traditional organization, right? You have a company, you have people there, you have processes, you have a system of motivation, and all that is created for the life as we knew it before AI, right? So now, basically, that's why it's called digital transformation. It is transformation, right? We need to transform it. And it's not easy. It's never easy in any industry. But in industrial sector, there is this huge advantage. The thing is, in most of these companies, even CFOs and, of course, CEOs and other guys, in many cases, they are with engineering background, which really helps a lot because at least they understand when we are talking about like A/B tests or something, right? With bankers, it can be much more tricky. So yeah, there is some advantage of that. Another thing is exactly related to what you said. They have a lot of tangible assets. And that's what actually motivates them very well to start using AI. Because if you think about it, right, you have those investments like billions of dollars in equipment. And if you can, without additional capital investments, just by using your data, start being 3-5% more efficient, it's huge, right? Their profit margins in these industries, like 8% in a good year. So when you are saving few percent, you're multiplying your profits without capital investments, which before AI was pretty much impossible, right? If you want to be more efficient as a methodologist, for example, okay, you invest in your blast furnace, $1 billion, and yeah, here you are. And now it's almost a free lunch. So yeah, it happens, and it's super interesting.
But I can see really, how the business case really makes sense, right? For any of these industries. But how do you get started there, And my question is more specifically, then to be very practical, where should they start on this journey, right? I mean, okay, you show them the benefits, of adding, data-driven approach to their business, what machine learning models can do to it. But practically, how do they get started? Because if you've never hired, a data scientist, it's pretty difficult to start, right? If you've have no idea, about which platform to use. Okay, maybe now you can call Claire, but how do you get started on that one, right? I mean, what are what are your advice to these guys to get started on that journey?
Well, actually, believe it or not, but nowadays most of them don't really need an advice on how to start because they have already started. Now they need an advice on how to proceed, right? After they finish like a bunch of successful pilots and maybe something even implemented in like a real industrial environment, now their question is how do we scale it? And it's a whole new set of problems. But let's say 3-5 years ago, when there was this question on how do you start, usually what I try to explain to all these guys is that doesn't matter, just start, just do something. Just find a partner, find a company that offers something, some kind of service that makes sense to you, and just try. Because it's not a technology in the sense that you implemented these new technologies before. You need to get real practice, and now you will see where you can create value. You will see, by the way, speaking about data, which data is valuable for you and why, right? Because well, the value of data depends on how you can use it, and you don't know before you start using it. And all kinds of things. You will realize what is it you need to change in your company, as Hemant said, right? All this, traditional ways of doing business. That's super important because very often what we've seen, again, both in the industrial sector and in banking and also in retail, in pretty much any organization, you start implementing those AI things, tools, not even tools, but basically project solutions, right? They work. The solutions work. They optimize one process or another. The problem is the whole process stops working. The real question is how do you scale? How do you really implement it throughout the organization? And well, the answer is you transform. And that's a lot of work. That's quite a journey.
And Claire, is it what you when you come into the picture, because what you said about Dataiku, right? It's a platform to scale, right? Your AI efforts. When is it that you guys come into the picture? Is it before actually the journey has started? Is it just after, at the moment of scaling? And how do you position actually your platform with your clients?
Yeah, it's a great question, given the different levels of maturity in terms of AI in the market, and some key pain points that we believe are key to successfully scaling your data effort. So first of all, the access to data, unified access to data, and knowing what's in your data. Then one other data point that strikes me when we talk about starting but also scaling is that 86% models that are developed do not end up in production. What does that mean? It means that they don't get deployed. It's not just creating the inputs of the model, it's also how you then work with the processes, the IT, with the different channels, marketing channels of the company to implement the model, right? And so a platform like Dataiku that is end-to-end, that goes from like accessing the data to putting models in production, typically helps with all of that, right? Because it's not because if you do one step that you will get where you need to go, right? You need to go throughout the entire journey of data science to produce results. So the great thing to answer your question is that Dataiku can help you both when you start, right, with those essential steps around accessing data and putting in production, and then when you scale and you need to do this massively. And I would just add one last comment that with scale, another problem appears. It's governance, right? When you have one or two models that you need to monitor, one or two data sets that you're playing with, it's easy to control. When you're producing thousands of them, right, tens of thousands of them, that's where if you don't have a systematic way of monitoring your models and monitoring your output,
Right.
it can get out of control. In an automated fashion, it's very handy when you scale. I mean, it's not just handy, it's actually pretty critical to success.
That's a very interesting point, this one. It's, Hemant, first, it's 86% of your models as well never going to production. Is that the case for you? And the second thing is to what Claire just mentioned is, how do you actually monitor, right? And, the output and the impact of your own, models across the company. How do you do that really?
We have been in this journey for a reasonable time. And the teams, the way we typically put the models, we do not say that the most complex model is the one which will be going first. Mm-hmm. We go with the idea that let the problem statement be very clear to us so that the rest of the journey will not get terminated just because the problem statement was not clear to us. Let's go with a model which is going to give us insight, which will give us the right sense of direction. And once we have established the complete pipeline, then we will go for the next iteration where we will make more complex models to do the same task with the better accuracies, let's say. So whether it's the recommender system, whether it's, think of it, let's say, building a chatbot, all of this is something which is part of it. We are seeing day in, day out that structured data, unstructured data, simple model, complex model, combination of them with the right business intent. That is the one which gives successes to us. And our success rate in that sense will be much higher because this pipeline is very, smoothened inside Swiggy when we are working on any problem statement of our choice.
I want to...
Actually, because you said that we can...
Absolutely.
I think I agree a bit with what Claire said about these models, and 68%, which is, I think is actually a pretty realistic number, probably even more of the models end up not being deployed. I just don't think it's, in any case, I don't think it's bad. I think it's absolutely perfect. I mean, that's the whole point of data science. Data science is an experimental science. So when what we are doing with our models, we are basically experimenting on data instead of doing this in real life. Which means that if we can experiment on data and then we see, okay, we don't like the results and we just throw it away, that's great. We save money on doing something like that in real life.
I want to move the conversation to a few more points to cover. All of you have worked or work, with the Google, the Facebook of this world, right, in your respective market. Do you see truly a risk of concentration of data, around few big companies like this, that at the end of the day, not only will harness the data, but will also, manage the access to this data? And by the way, have also the resources to build their own models, but also on the human factor, recruit all the best talent. So the concentration of power, that you see around this, is it a threat to the ecosystem of AI companies? And the second thing is, we talk about data privacy. I mean, there's been a lot of talks from regulators about, how to protect the data, generated by consumers, how to give more control back to the consumers. Is it actually, creating the right framework for AI companies in the different markets? My point is, are you better, working in Europe with GDPR, or are you better working, in India right now where the laws around privacy exist, but sometimes are a bit more fluid? And is there some kind of regulation, competition when it comes to data privacy that could play? So I just wanted to move the conversation to that one around the power of some of these huge platforms. Is it a threat to the ecosystem actually more than an enabler? And the second thing is the data regulation, how you see that.
There is nothing which is too big to fail in this world. So this is another era where it seems data is playing a huge role. And this is the time of, let's say, Google, Facebook, Amazon. But there is nothing like the new technology will not come, which will not replace them as well. It's just a matter of time.
Oh.
When will it happen? It will happen when the leadership at these teams, in these places, when they take wrong decisions of certain kind. And a new player somewhere on Amazon starting from a garage will be the one which will come and replace them. And we have seen, WhatsApp in that sense, means so much of social media was there with Facebook and everything. And WhatsApp, when it was sold, it was the biggest transaction of that time. And similarly, LinkedIn from nowhere, Microsoft acquired it. So innovation is happening, and the only thing which I see is this innovation is happening at a pace where any company which is not reinventing itself for, let's say, just 5 years will be going down. On the privacy side, to be honest, Lauren, means yes and no what I feel, because without this data, all the things which are happening cannot be done. So that is, but if the privacy gets broken to that extent, let's say, Alexa, is it listening me all the time? Whether I have asked it or, I have not woken up. That is the thing where I think a thin line, a line needs to be drawn. When I need it, my data may be, utilized for certain services. But as soon as I say that I do not need it, my data should not be used to show me advertisements or haunt me all across the world, whether I'm in US or whether I'm in India. My data starts haunting me, now you are in New York, this is the pizza, you liked it in Bangalore, why don't you go there? And I would prefer that that's not done to me. So this is the place where I feel data is going to play a role. The good thing, Lauren, what I say is data of one place may not be very useful in another place. So let's say the data which our customers are giving for food, it may not have any utility for me, let's say, if I go into another business. So in that sense, a generic AI which can really do everything looking at this data in all the domains, that scenario is not there. So this data, and another problem, Lauren, which I see, that companies which are not using data is also having a shelf life. The data which was there 2 years back, my own personality, my own priorities may get changed. So anybody and everybody who is not harnessing this data is doing this service to themselves. And in the process, even if huge amount of data is there, you are not making use of it. 2 years down the line, it may not be useful for you.
Where I see like tremendous value delivered, and where really I see the power of data is when our customers are able to deliver super tailored experiences to their customer. And they can do that because they have all this data, right? And for me, these are the winning strategies, right? So when you were asking about like what is the threat? Well, for me, the more data you have, the more able you are to be tailored. And it matters in fintech, it matters in healthcare, it matters in retail, it matters in food delivery, obviously. And so having access to that data just consolidates, right, that dominant position.
I agree with what Claire said about importance of being able to like get more specific with some data. I just make a slightly different conclusion out of it, which is basically closer to what Helen said. I don't believe these giants being a serious threat. There are some very specific sectors where they can, like for example, if you want to train your algorithm, well, I don't know, recognize cats from dogs. Apparently, being a Google, you have so much more training data that no one else can do it better. That's true, but come on, that's a very specific thing. When you look around at the real business applications or real life applications, humans, you will see that actually, what is it Google knows that well? Okay, it knows what I'm searching for and what I'm clicking at, but on the other hand, for example, what I'm buying, what am I shopping, preferences, probably American Express and MasterCard knows better, right? And well, which wine I prefer, Vivina knows better. And what I prefer to read, probably Facebook knows better. So it's actually still split around. And one more thing why I don't think it's much of a threat. I honestly, and again, I know that it's kind of a typical concern nowadays, that these guys are going to have all the data. I actually believe in just the opposite thing. I believe that data will become a commodity very soon. We are producing so much data every second, every millisecond with each and every action and it still grows, right? That in, let's say 10 years, okay, if I need to know something about, some phenomena, some people's behavior, I could use different types of data to get pretty much the same result. We'll have more and more of such data, which are directly or indirectly giving you what you need about this or that phenomena. So with the speed of producing this data, with such a crazy pace of producing this data, yeah, I believe in 10 years, maybe 20, it will just be a commodity. We'll forget about our concerns today. Oh, we probably need to buy external data. Come on. Data is everywhere. The real problem is not how to get it. Again, you know what it reminds me? When search engines just started to exist in internet, in like the 90s. What they competed on, believe it or not, was on how many documents they can find. Yeah. Right? It's really funny to think about right now, because very quickly, probably in like 2001 or 2, the problem became completely the opposite, right? Okay, we now have all those thousands and millions of documents. How do we choose 10 to show our users? And it's just another view on it. So I think that's exactly what's going to happen with data. We are now thinking that we need more and more of it just because we don't feel like we have so much. We will never be able to analyze it anyway, but we will. We will feel it. And we will realize that our biggest problem is to choose which data we actually need, which data is actually valuable enough to store, to process, to govern, to deal with it, because it's, it costs you. And with unlimited amount of data, it can be unlimited costs. So yeah, that's how I see it. Like just the opposite problem.
Good point, this one. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think though that all data is commodity. Right? I mean, I agree with you that there's more and more data being created and that it's more and more accessible. But what I can clearly see in certain industries, it's the secret sauce of the company. And it's a very, very private and protected asset. Typically in the healthcare industry, right? Also, you could argue in oil and gas, right? Where it's been made difficult to access the data, actually. It was still on paper just a few years ago, right? So it would be.
True.
So, I agree that part of it is commoditizing, but part of it is still the secret sauce. Yeah.
Actually, the funny thing is that as examples, you named the industries where the access to data is regulated. So you're absolutely right. In healthcare and in oil and gas and a few others, there is some data which is really hard to get, but in big part is because it's regulated, how to access it, like in oil and gas, or like in banking. And in this Actually, from this standpoint, the regulation can do both things. Lauren asked us about privacy, right? And I like what Hammond said, that it's more about control, right, and ownership than privacy.
There's been a lot of focus from a lot of different bodies, right, regulators, etc., around data ownership, etc. Are we regulating the right thing? My point is, it's all about data ownership and how you share versus, the models and how they are built. Because data science is about experience with data, but it's not just always innocuous, right? We are making real decisions. We are making decisions about, are we going to give a credit to that person or not, right? Are we going to get, the right, outcome of, scanning, radio scans, etc. So there are real decisions coming out of the models. And sometimes the models are kind of a black box, really not fully understood. They don't always go in production, as we know, but they do. And today we only focus about the data components, not so much about, how the models are built, how the models are used, if the models actually create sometimes new forms of inclusion, for instance. And do you see this potentially, as a risk? Do you see this as an area where the regulators will want to step in a bit more in the future?
Well, there is one thing that regulators, at least in financial industry, for example, are already doing, and that's the thing about the right to explanation, right? You probably know that. Something that stops many banks in the some uses of AI. And I think it's completely wrong. It's a completely wrong move. Because our problem when we think about AI being kind of good or bad or ethical, our problem is that we not just want AI to be ethical, we actually try to get AI to be more ethical than we humans are. And that's why it's so hard. Because basically when you say explanation, okay, you're saying like, oh, it's a black box model. Okay, but another human, isn't it a black box? I mean, yes, it can generate explanation. Well, algorithms can too. It doesn't mean that it really is why this decision was made. When some manager in the bank gives you an explanation, it might be a good one, sounds good, but it doesn't mean that it's an actual reason why this decision was made. And you will never know it. Another human is a black box for you, right? And the same happens with an algorithm. And again, the same thing with biases, right? When we are so concerned of AI, and well, rightly concerned, but still concerned with AI getting biased because we trained it on our data from our past decisions, that's because our decisions were biased, right? So we want AI to be better than us, more ethical than us.
Yes. That's true.
Right. So actually, this was a very great point, actually, and this is something which I have pondered a lot exactly on this point. So think of it that we want AI to use the human data to come to good decisions,
Yes.
but those good decisions are almost going to be human. It cannot be better than that, but in certain cases it can be better because experts could be there, and those different experts, if they would take opinion, maybe the better decision may come. But let's say I want to make the AI very ethical and unbiased, and I remove certain parts of the data which is biased.
Yeah.
Now what I have done is I have created a bias in my own data.
Exactly.
Now if this data, so if really I want an ethical AI and everything, should it not be rule driven in that sense? Why even you want to have the human data? Because if human data is the one which you want to emulate, obviously, you need the decisions which have been made along with the different things. And as soon as you remove some of the human decisions, we do not know how this AI is. Is it really AI or is it something which is a biased AI now? And think of it, on occasion, there are, in management parlance, we say butterfly effects. Certain decisions which may not be looking right, but on occasion, after some time, they make a big difference. Now, if AI is being done in the way we are just thinking, and all these data points which are not confining to my own hypothesis, they have been thrown out. No innovation will ever happen because AI is not even used to it. So think of it that AI is that. What AI do we are looking for? Is it supposed to be a biased AI, a very good human being, which none of us are, and then that AI will turn against us because we are not good. So that AI will make it sure that we do not survive just for the reason because we are not ethical. It's a complex thing if you look at it. It's not that easy because we are the one who are the way we are. And we are trying to replicate a machine which is supposed to be like this. So
Right.
it's a delicate question actually.
And the only way to make AI ethical, because AI is actually an algorithm, right? It's a set of algorithms, whatever. The thing is, if you wanted to do something, you need to be able to quantify it, to measure it. So basically ethics, which always was a very theoretical thing, it's a branch of philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly with AI, it becomes an applied science. We need applied ethics. Because what we thought before are like, again, very theoretical questions which are not actually supposed to be solved, like trolley dilemma, right? Like when you have this trolley which will probably kill one person or another and or one person versus 100 people, something, right? Do you change those tracks or not? How do you make this decision? There's not to be a good decision for it, right? That's exactly an example of these dilemmas in ethics. The problem is we now have a practical need for an answer because we have a self-driving car and we need it to make decisions, right? So we need to be able to measure it somehow and give it some kind of, measurements on what means ethical. There is this website called Moral Machine. It was done by MIT guys exactly for that. They decided, okay, let's outsource it. Right? So they would show you, I would crowdsource it, actually. They would show you a set of pictures, or 2 pictures. And you need to choose. So you basically have a car, and you either kill the passenger in the car, or you can kill an old woman crossing the street, for example. And they have actually different characters there. For example, there could be like old people or kids, or I think even burglars, with masks, so like bad guys, or doctors, definitely good guys, something like this. And they will see what you're choosing. They have a lot of statistics around it, and it's actually quite exciting. Of course, one of the things we can easily see there, and they publish reports from time to time, is that there is no one ethics. We were discussing this with a guy who works in automotive industry, and we came up with this idea that we probably should produce a separate module for car, ethics module, which could be of your choice, because you might be Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or whatever, and you can have actually different preferences, because what they show you in this statistics is that, of course, the Eastern civilizations like Chinese and Japanese, they have this preference for elder people, right? They would say them at any cost. And of course, the Western civilization, for example, they would have preference for kids. So you need to be able to choose which ethics model you want in your self-driving car, right? And probably we'll train these models in Buddhist monastery and something like this, or Christian one.
If you really look at it, means ethics is, my daughter sometimes asks these questions and I do not have clear answer. So let's say the head of the state is there, and, another person is there who is nobody. From the ethics perspective, they have equal value to their lives. And I do not know this person who is nothing at this point of time, what he will become, he or she may become in future. And I have to take a call that should it be done or should that be done? And most probably, all this Z security and everything which is provided to different other people, and, all these systems which have been made. If you really look at it, if the system was really, really democratic, ethical and everything, none of this was needed, but we created because we know that there is a complex system, a complex mind, and we want more protection for somebody, whereas certain people are okay, and we are having all our biases and everything inbuilt, and we have created this complex society. And on top of that, think of it, on occasion, each of us has a gut feeling. We cannot define.
As I said, black box. Human beings black box.
Maybe a variable in your model, gut feel variable. There might be a
exactly.
So
now it's. I think we do not have understanding how exactly it needs to be done, because we do not know what needs to be done. And whatever we do is one model, means the way, Jane was mentioning, a Buddhist model or this, and maybe there is something, a Buddhist kid model versus a Buddhist, or a Buddhist who is settled in, let's say, US. His preferences may have changed. It's not easy at this stage.
Well, it looks like we are going to have to couple, data science, studies with philosophical studies, right? It seems like the two come together at the end of the day. And it looks like every practitioner, of AI will need to have these very strong roots also in ethics and philosophy, because we can't ask, a model not to have bias when actually the data comes from us and is biased by essence, right? The second thing is also the necessity to think about the different outcomes, cases, rooted on our own preferences, right? So you kind of upload your ethical profile. I love that one as well, And I think maybe it's trying to find a balance between, an output of a model, a quantitative output, but at the end of the day, the gut feel and the human nature of these decisions. So I think that will be the conclusion of our discussion, because, we could go on for quite some time on this. But again, thank you guys for your time. Thanks really for the engagement and the conversation. Really fantastic to have your point of views there. Really great. And look, I wish you all the very best, for the end of the year.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.